So welcome to This Cycling Life. Today I'm delighted to be joined by a star of the online cycling world, Dione Wang. And what we're going to do is in 7 minutes, we're going to give you 5 tips on how to win a virtual cycling race. So Dione, why don't you get us started with the start of the race?
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie, and everyone. Welcome. So, as we discussed the last time, Zwift racing is all about very intense work for about 40 minutes to an hour. For these kind of efforts, you're on all the pedals all the time. You want a super well warm up because at the start of the pen, everyone is going to go full gas for about a minute, even 90 seconds. I typically like to warm up for at least about 40 minutes. Use an hour if you've got the time. Get into the start pen of Zwift races early, so you're closer to the start line itself. You don't want to be about 50 meters back and lose a lot of time, especially in a race where there are about 800 people. The first 3 to 4 minutes are extremely critical. The first minute would be somewhere around 150% of your FTP, and then you'll be hovering around your FTP for about the next 2, 3, 4 minutes. Around the first 5 minutes, you see breaks starting to happen. So again, your warm up is extremely critical because in the first 5 minutes, you need to be working extremely hard.
Excellent, Dione, and that's great advice. So people, be ready to start hard. And by the way, you need to be on those pedals before the gun goes. So
Exactly.
You want to actually be winding that gear up at least 15 to 20 seconds before the start gun goes. So you go out of the start like a greyhound out of the box, full gas, because as Dione said, you want to be really in that front group in the first couple of minutes of the race. Now, there's a reason for that, Dione. Talk to us about point number 2, the drafting effect.
You definitely want to be behind other riders when you're riding in a pack. When you're in the front, just like in real life, the algorithm will make you produce a lot more watts to go at the same speed. So even though you're on Zwift, you want to be looking at the speed that you're going at and making sure that your speed is the same speed as the group while you're producing slightly fewer watts. On Zwift, you can see the relative wattages that everyone else is producing around you. If other guys are doing about 4.5, you should be targeting about 4.3. The idea is the same as in the real world. Aerodynamics is king. You definitely want to use the draft of other riders around you. This even applies on climbs. You might think that if there's a 5% gradient, there's not much drafting, but the speeds on Zwift are a little bit exaggerated. So even though the gradient might be 5%, you find yourself still at 27k an hour, and there is a lot of draft to be had at that point.
Okay, so make sure that you're in the wheels, just as you are during a real race. And as my coach, Alan Davis, always says, only ever work as hard as the least hardest working rider in that breakaway. Save your energy because you're going to need it later on. Dione, why don't you talk to us about point number 3, which is studying the course, understanding the profile of the race itself.
So just like in a real life, you want to make sure that you know the course beforehand. You want to know where the climbs are, where the descents are. But one thing about Zwift that contradicts real life is that you want to attack into a corner. In real life, because of physics, you have to gradually scrub off some speed before you enter a corner. But in Zwift, because you have to produce a lot of power to enter the corner, to enter it at a slightly higher speed than everyone else around you. There is no crashing in Zwift. So you want to approach the corner at full speed. And therefore, it's important to know where the corners are. This is especially important on descents. You might want to rest a little bit on the descents, but when there's a corner approaching, then you cannot rest.
Absolutely. And just as in a real race, you really do need to know when the top of the climbs are coming, for example. When you're on the limit, and as Dione has said, when you're in a Zwift race, you're absolutely on the limit. You're on, over, slightly under FTP pretty much the whole way. So just knowing psychologically when the top of that climb is coming can also be a big morale booster just to get yourself over the top. So talk to us, Dione, now about the next aspect here, because there is some gaming elements that people need to be aware of as well.
Yes, so Zwift wants to introduce some elements of unpredictability, luck, and chance, just like in real life. You might have weather conditions changing randomly, winds coming from nowhere, and sometimes in races you even get sent the wrong way. So in Zwift, it's not quite as cruel as that. you might get after every lap on a course, you might get a little boost that you can use. This is accessed via your smartphone. You have a few options. One is called a feather power up. This reduces your weight for 15 seconds and obviously is important on a hill. You have an arrow power up that makes you slightly more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. This is extremely useful when you're entering a sprint. You have options to make yourself undraftable by other riders. So again, these are just random little things that make the small difference in giving you a slightest advantage over others. And this is a purely gaming element where you use your smartphone and click a button.
Okay, so what Dione is also saying here, folks, is we need to become world-class at multitasking because, of course, all of this is happening on the screen. So not only are you keeping those legs turning over, you're thinking tactically, you're also here using the power-ups, you're using the feathering effects, you're watching also the wattages of the other riders. So you really need to be in sync with all of the data that's coming in and be very prepared to do the right thing at the right time. Finally, of course, you could be coming to the finish with a group of riders. So tell us about the sprint, Dione.
So this ties nicely to our previous point. This is again about split-second decision making. The sprint typically happens in the last 200-300 meters. You want to be prepared from about 1 kilometer out. You want to make sure that you're saving as much energy in this last half a minute as you can. And deciding when to go for the sprint is really something that you have to learn over time on Zwift. It really depends on the speed of the group. It depends on what power up you have on hand. Usually, the arrow one will be the most useful in a sprint. But if it's an uphill sprint, of course, it will be something like the feather. If you haven't got a power up, this might, mentally set you back a little bit. But if you know yourself well enough, then you might want to attack the sprint slightly further ahead, depending on your competitors, if you know them from previous races. So again, this is making decisions when your heart rate is at, close to max and you're extremely tired.
So, folks, there's our 5 tips in 7 minutes on how to win a Zwift race. And of course, if you follow these tactics closely, you can be a star on Zwift. So from Dione Wang and I, we're wishing you every success. If you've liked this video, of course, please do give us the thumbs up. And of course, subscribe to the This Cycling Life YouTube channel. Dione Wang, great to have you on the channel again.